pod bay doors, please, Hal.
I suppose you want a kiss.
Kissing would be nice, yes? I am Prince Naveen.
Of Maldonia.
Prince?
I was cursed by a dastardly witch doctor. 1 minute I am a prince, charming and handsome, cutting a rug, and then the next thing I know, I'm tripping over these.
Everyone thinks they know the story of the Princess and the Frog.
You must kiss me.
Excuse me?
Please, princess. It will make me human again.
Just one kiss.
Unless you beg for more.
But no one knows what happened after the kiss. Until now.
How did you get way up there? And how did I get way down here and all this?
This holiday season, in the tradition of Walt Disney's most beloved classics, comes the story behind the most magical kiss the world has ever known.
This gonna be good!
Walt Disney Pictures, The Princess and the Frog.
Come, Whippacker. That's new.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. And seated across the country from me, a man who is almost there, the critic, historian, and legend from TalkMovieToMe.com, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
Yeah, I don't care, Jerry. I've got friends on the other side.
Welcome once again to our... we do this every once in a while. We're going back to Disney.
I love this picture.
And I just love this movie.
I really do, too. Really love this one.
Well, before we get there, why don't you tell the folks where they can find us?
Well, if you're looking for us, you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on YouTube. You can go to our main page with all of our back episodes at thepodbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find us on Twitter and at Patreon. Throw a tip into our virtual tip jar, both at the same username, at pod_bay.
And if you want to be specific, our full title is the Pod Bay Doors Podcast with Doug and Jerry.
Yeah, because otherwise you might not find us. And
yeah, because there's Pod Bay Doors Podcast all over the place.
yeah, we wish we'd have known that.
Yeah.
Before we
kind of came up with this title.
Before we got 110 episodes in.
Yeah. Kind of came up with this just on the fly. Anyway, today we're going back into the Disney oeuvre, and we're going to talk about something a little more modern, because we did a year ago a retrospective, for better or worse, on the Disney Renaissance, and we're coming back now to talk about The Princess and the Frog. Significantly later, 10 years after the Renaissance? This is 10 years after Tarzan.
Yeah.
And Disney, by this point,
took a real dump.
Well, I was going to say, by this point, the term "a shadow of its former self" would be an understatement, because I think by the time Tarzan came out, Disney was experiencing something they'd never experienced before, which was competition.
Mm-hmm.
They created a renaissance that created a revitalization of the process and interest in the animated form, not just with kids, but with teenagers and adults, that was so significant in the culture that every other studio in Hollywood wanted to create animated product.
And that's where DreamWorks Animation Studios came from. Fox's ill-fated one. There's then Sony, Illumination, all this
Studio Ghibli even, Studio Ghibli got a new life.
Yeah, which I'm always happy for. But,
absolutely.
Yeah, it was funny that their best work in decades caused their worst work ever. It's like,
well, there were a lot of problems. A lot of it was Michael Eisner, who was just allowing these products to come through that were just crap, and a lot of them were experiments that didn't work.
mm-hmm.
Remember that movie, that Treasure Planet?
Yes.
That they've been trying to get off the ground for 10 years, and it just didn't work.
Ironically, it didn't get off the ground, and it's a space movie.
Yeah. They tried that Atlantis.
Yeah.
And that Atlantis, and even an art design by the guy who did Hellboy didn't work.
Right, and they just didn't get much of anything going, and everything that was coming out from other studios was way better.
Right.
And then there was those direct-to-video sequels.
Right. Because Shrek came out. Ice Age was a surprise hit.
Mm-hmm.
Ants, all of this other stuff. The only thing that Disney had animation-wise was Pixar.
Right, and even at that point, they were just a distributor. They
were in a legal argument with them.
Yeah.
Because of Toy Story 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because Michael Eisner broke his promise, and it was a 5-picture deal, and the thing was supposed to go to video. Mm-hmm. And it was they split off, and Disney tried to make their own 3D animated film, and the movie they came up with was Chicken Little.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that movie's terrible.
It is very, very bad.
But this came out of trying to revitalize what Disney was, Walt's legacy.
Right, and it wouldn't have happened the way that it did if the Disney studio didn't end up basically being taken over by the bigwigs of Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
Which was kind of a culmination of that battle, is that they were basically like, okay, well, you come on and be part of us, and you take over our animation division.
Yeah,
and
it got exponentially better.
Right, and they were originally going to scrap this and make it 3D, computer generated. And Lasseter came in and said, no, this is going to be traditional 2D animation. And it has ended up being the last traditional Disney film, 2D animation film that they've made, isn't it?
They got rid of 250 animators,
mm-hmm.
and then called them back for this.
Yeah.
And I called a lot of them back for this. And it was supposed to be a return to form.
And it is.
And a lot of people thought that the reason that the movie didn't succeed at the box office was because it was 2D animation. That is not true.
No.
That is not true. The reason that it did not succeed at the box office is because it opened 7 days before James Cameron's Avatar.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world went to see Avatar.
Multiple times.
And forgot about Princess and the Frog.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And
Which is a
This
tragedy
movie's-
because this is such a good movie. And
It is.
This didn't even get nominated for the Best Animated Feature Oscar, did it?
Well, and it was seen as kind of damaged product, which it's absolutely not, as
No.
evidenced by the love that it's received since.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that what happened to it was unfair. I really
Yeah.
do, because it is a really solid movie. It's
It
the
is.
first so-called Disney princess movie, first fairy tale that they've done since Little Mermaid.
Well, Beauty and the Beast.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, still, I mean, it had been forever since they'd done
It had
this.
been well, yeah. I mean Aladdin too, but yeah, it had been a long time since they adapted an old story.
And in between, and in between was, like we said, Atlantis, Treasure Planet, Home on the Range,
Oof.
that Fantasia sequel, all of that stuff. And this just lackluster stuff. This is a really good movie.
It is with a lot of dynamic performances,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fun characters.
Mhm. There's a lot going on in this movie.
Yeah,
I was watching this the other night.
and
Boy,
Keith
there's
David.
a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Keith David.
Yeah.
I just love that he shows up in places that you don't expect him to.
Mm.
I was watching that weird Stretch Armstrong show on Netflix, and he was one of the voices. I'm like, oh my god,
haven't seen that yet.
he'll just show up anywhere.
He played the President of the United States on Rick and Morty.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He'll just show up. He was in that Future Man on Hulu. This absolutely bonkers sci-fi comedy that they put, and he was the reason that the world cured all diseases because he had cold sores. He had hepatitis, and it was just his quest to rid people of hepatitis, and he ended up ridding people of all viruses.
Mhm.
But he was a main character in both seasons of that.
Well, Princess and the Frog tells me that he could be a song and dance man. Because that Friends on the Other Side is a great song. And it's a great piece of animation.
That is the best villain song since Be Prepared in Disney.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so good.
We also cannot go any further without mentioning the other milestone of this movie.
Yes.
That this has not only a prominent amount of African American characters, but they are voiced by African American actors.
Mm-hmm. And it features the first black Disney princess.
Right. Who, and I'm writing a book about Disney, and I was really kind of getting into the history of this. The animators are not blind to the fact that Disney has a history
A very
with history,
yes.
and a very blind eye, historically.
Checkered past.
Checkered past. That's a good term. Because when you think of Disney and African Americans, usually the go-to was Song of the South.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, now this generation, when they think of those two things together, those two elements together, this is what they think of.
Right, and that's really a wonderful thing. I also think that this...
I hate that it took 80 years to get there, but...
Well, yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and you've done more reading on this than I have. Is this the first or only Disney movie to take place in the U.S.? Princess movie to take place in the U.S.?
Yes, I believe so. Because one of the things that Musker and Clements noted when they were putting this together is that most fairy tales are European.
Mm-hmm.
They take place in Germany. They take place in England. They take place in, different places. This one, they wanted it to be uniquely American.
And it's set in the 20s in New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we have open up with a song sung by the regrettably now late Dr. John, who was literally the voice of New Orleans.
Right.
You didn't see a movie about New Orleans or in New Orleans that didn't have him on the soundtrack somewhere.
Right.
Like, he was so good, and he just died a week before we were recording this. I was so sad to see that. He was such a dynamic performer.
Yeah. And they know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
The animators absolutely know where they are.
Oh, yeah.
I think a more lazy creative team would have made this generic. Anytown, USA.
Right.
That just says we're not going to think about it.
Right. Or we want you to believe that this is your Midwestern town. It's like, I don't live in a Midwestern town.
I live in Birmingham, Alabama. Believe me, I know it when I see it.
Yeah,
That's why I
Pittsburgh
hated
is
it.
pretty identifiable.
That's why I hated that movie, Mom's Night Out. One of the major reasons why I hated it was because it takes place in Birmingham, Alabama, and no one ever acknowledges that. But what's so great about this is that when you're in New Orleans, the colors, the feel, the look, you know where you are.
Just the energy of the picture is propelled by that New Orleans attitude.
That New Orleans flavor.
Yeah, it's all the way through it. And I think that helps give, if you'll forgive the pun, the movie some spice. I think it's a couple of hits of Tabasco, and it's the bee's knees.
Tabasco. I love they call it Tabasco. Give it a shot at Tabasco. But I was thinking about this, is that I have 2 points about our heroine. One positive, one possibly negative. You'll forgive me. I'm not going to be like, oh, here we go. But Tiana is one of the great Disney characters.
Yeah.
For one thing, she's not looking for a man.
No.
Her trajectory.
She's looking for anything but, honestly.
Her trajectory. She just kind of backs into a romance.
Yeah.
The trajectory that Tiana has is to own this restaurant. To get what her father never had. To honor her father, who died, who just basically worked himself to death. He worked several jobs.
So does she.
And so does she. And I think he was a veteran, I think. Because you see his picture there in the uniform.
Right.
And this is what she wants. She's not looking for, I want true love, I want romance, I want dreams to come true, and all of this.
No, she wants her restaurant. She wants her dream to come true, but she wants a restaurant. She does. Right. She's not her friend, her rich blonde, flighty friend.
Charlotte.
I
love Charlotte.
You know
Charlotte.
What? I have to give them credit for this. They could have made her a really terrible person, and they made her an extremely good friend. In a time where that would not have been looked upon favorably.
Right.
So I have to give them
particularly
credit
Mayor's daughter.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I have to give them credit for that.
And by the way, only in New Orleans is the mayor called Big Daddy.
I would wager that there are other points in the South that happens, specifically probably Georgia. But
it just fits in New Orleans, though.
Yeah.
But Tiana is just, she has a sense of agency. She's not holding on to anybody. She works her butt off until, she's, her friends come up to her. You want to go dancing tonight? She says, I can't, I got to work.
Right. And then later on, when she's with Prince Naveen, she's like, I've never danced before. She's just been working like her whole life. Her father gave her that, because when I love the line when she's like, Charlotte said, if you wish upon a star, your dreams will come true.
Mhm.
And her father's like, yeah, with the wishes, and that's one part of it. But it's with hard work and determination, and then you'll get
sacrifice.
and sacrifice. And that's the first time in a Disney movie where wishing upon a star wasn't going to get you anything.
Right.
And
it
I
wasn't
love
the
that.
central
Right.
part of it.
And I love that.
One of the things, though, is that it's interesting that the movie locks into this character, but on her individuality. The negative, the one thing about this that I'm not so crazy about, and this is a troubling thing, as I'm studying Disney, I have a real problem with this, is that you have to fit a sense of reality into a brand that you've got to sell to kids.
Okay.
And
I see where you're going with that.
It's really, really tough to do that. We talked about that when we talked about Hunchback of Notre Dame, is that they're trying to fit Victor Hugo's repressive, hard-bound France of the 12th century into a narrative that's got to be sold to children and sold from toys at McDonald's.
Right.
Here, let's face it, okay? Let's be realistic. She is a woman of color in the 1920s in the South.
Yeah.
There are literally 2 points. The segregation in this time and place was firmly entrenched. Absolutely. Down to the letter of the law. Possibly not as much in New Orleans as it might have been in Mississippi or Alabama, but it existed. There are literally 2 points at which you can see that, and they're very, 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 very small. One takes place right at the beginning of the movie when she gets on a streetcar.
Yep.
And she is sitting in the back, and the white folks are sitting up front. That's a visual representation. The other is when she goes to Big Daddy's party, and she meets up with the Fenner brothers, the real estate guys who are going to get her set up with this abandoned sugar mill that she'll turn into the restaurant. And they tell her, and I quote, "A woman of your background doesn't need to be running a big business like that."
Right. There is one other, though. On the streetcar, again, when they're going, you see these, like, big kind of mansions, and
Plantation houses.
Yeah, plantation houses, and then all of a sudden, it crosses a line, and it's just tiny little shacks.
Right.
And that's where they get out.
The cultural divide.
You're right. So I understand your problem with that, but on the other hand, really, how are you going to do a race relations oriented kids movie that still works in The Princess and the Frog? Like, I get where you're coming from, and I'm glad that they even mention it. They do put that stuff in there.
Very small.
Very small. Very small. Enough for them to say that they didn't neglect it, but not enough to have kids raise complicated questions in the car on the way home.
I'm not saying that this is a major issue. I'm not saying that we have to have, the Klan or white people running around using the N-word or anything like that.
This shouldn't be Do the Right Thing animated for kids.
What I'm saying is,
Radio Raheem.
They were fight the power. They were on the way. They were on their way with the representation on the streetcar and with the Fenner brothers. Possibly, maybe a little more representation of the period in the background. You don't have to splash it all over the screen.
Right.
but it's an important part of this history. I'm not saying that the movie has to be about that. I'm just saying that it's neglectful not to have enough of it.
Well, I think
It's so invisible, though. You do have to look to find it.
I think that they wisely worked it in. If you'll notice, throughout the help is all people of color.
Right.
The musicians are people of color. The people who are working are black people.
And
the people who aren't really working are all
the
white
folks.
people.
You notice, I think the only people that are, if I'm not mistaken, I think the only people that are in Eudora's restaurant, or the restaurant they're working in, I think the only people that are in there are the people who are coming to see Tiana for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
But the Fenner brothers and then Big Daddy and Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody casually coming in because the color line, because you go here and they go there. I don't mean to make this such a big deal. I apologize. It's just it's an important issue when you have a film like this. And Disney's 70, 80 years of not dealing with this. And finally it lands, and they
dealing
do
with
get,
it very poorly.
But dealing with it, but again, you have the little box of the Disney brand, and what you fit in it has to be able to be sold to a family. So it's difficult to do that and really address the problems, because this is, after all, a fairy tale.
Right.
It's
And
a fantasy.
I think that if this were made now, this was 10 years ago, they would work a little bit more in.
Right.
Social consciousness has evolved to a point.
Still got a long way to go.
Well, obviously. But this was, this was released the year that Barack Obama was sworn into office for the first term. So, regrettably, it took that to have major conversations about this, and kids are more exposed to it. Kids understand more of it now, unfortunately and fortunately. So now I think they'd be a little bit broader with their with what they were saying. But then the fact that it's even there is a minor miracle.
Well, as far as I don't want anybody to think I'm really complaining. I'm not complaining. I'm simply addressing it. What I'm saying is the snapshot of what I've just said and what I've just brought up is the fact that the animators were very, very conscious of the concerns that people were having.
Right.
One of the things was the character Tiana herself, because initially the design of Tiana was very Caucasian. Her facial features were very Caucasian. And so when they hired the actress to play the part of the voice, Anika Nani Rose, when they hired her, they redesigned Tiana to look like her. And she has a very flat, wide nose. And they gave that to Tiana to make her cultural, or to make her features not so much you have a white person and you just painted them black.
Animated blackface.
Right, animated blackface. And also they addressed concerns. Her name was originally Maddie, which people were worried too closely resembled Mammy. And they changed her job. She was originally a chambermaid.
Oh.
So they were very conscious of what they had. And but the interesting thing is, they were very, very interested in writing this character as an individual. not only as a black woman, but as a person, as an individual, as somebody who works hard and has to, and you sense because she's a black woman in the 1920s, has to work twice as hard and be twice as good to get anywhere. That is very, very prominent in the film.
Yes.
That is very prominent in the texture of this character and the texture of this story, beyond the fairy tale stuff. Because all of this is established before we even get to any magical stuff.
Right.
It's 20 minutes before we get to any kind of fairy tale elements. It establishes a groundwork of the world she lives in.
Yeah.
And the person that she is, and the person that she has been, and the person that she aspires to be. That's a giant leap forward. We're going to make a Disney princess who's an African American, but we're going to go far beyond that. We're going to make her a person. That's progress.
Yeah, that is. And it's damn good storytelling.
And it is damn good storytelling.
And you know, the two directors that did this, they also did The Little Mermaid and Aladdin.
Musker and Clements.
Yeah. So I mean, they were familiar with pushing the envelope because Jasmine was the first non-white Disney princess. So they've introduced this kind of stuff before, but they didn't really have to deal with racism or anything because they were all in Arabia. But
Jasmine and Aladdin
are white people painted brown.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Which is something they avoided here.
Yes, thankfully.
But the funny thing is this movie. We got to talk about this story because I was noting this last night. The story that they get involved in is really, really complicated.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Because she kisses the frog because he thinks it will turn him back into a prince, but she's not a princess. She's dressed as one.
She's dressed as one in the for the
costume ball.
Yeah.
And since she's not a princess, it turns her into a frog too. Now, here's the story. Here's what happens in this movie. See if you can follow me on this, okay? The Shadow Man wants to take over the town. So he has to transform Prince Naveen's manservant into a prince who has to marry the daughter of the mayor of the town. But in order to do that, they need to constantly have the blood of the prince to give to the manservant, or the disguise will melt away.
Right.
But then it turns out that the prince has to marry Charlotte because she's the daughter of the mayor, and the mayor is appointed the king of the Mardi Gras parade. Therefore, she's a princess. And
well, he has to kiss. He has to kiss her. He doesn't necessarily have to marry her.
By the end of the Mardi Gras at midnight, in order for it to work. And added to that, there's a love story in which Naveen and Tiana are falling in love with each other, and they're trying to figure out how to turn themselves back into human beings. And in order to do that, they have to go visit Mama Odie, who has to lay out the plot of the third act.
Right. And can I just say, Jennifer Lewis's Madame Odie is stunning.
Right.
I love her anyway. She's a national treasure, I think. She's wonderful on Blackish as Ruby. She's been around forever. She is so good in this.
Like, what is she, 125 years old or something like that?
Yeah. And
she's this voodoo white witch, and it's great. She's like...
she lives in a boat in a tree.
Yeah. Yeah. She has a snake.
A snake.
A pet.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's also super old, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just the character
And she-
is so lively and so much fun.
She said, "Would y'all like some candy?" She's got, was it pins and buttons?
Yeah.
Y'all be eating that candy between y'all and human. I just love the character. She's just so great.
It's such a great character. It really, really is. I can't say enough about Madame Odie, Mama Odie, but she was so much fun, and
Well, you had to have a nap shot to
the
Dr.
Shadow Man.
Facilier.
Yeah.
Dr. Facilier, that is a great villain.
Yes, he is. He's one of
I
the
was-
greats.
I always love how Disney does not just make a villain. When you look at the character, you know who the villain is.
Yeah. Yeah, they do not mince words, as it were, to let you know
No.
who's going to be the antagonist here. They definitely let you know.
Well, and the idea that his, I talked about how you talked about how hard they have to work, and it's interesting. I mean, even he has to work, because he plays these parlor tricks, and this whole thing with the voodoo and all of that stuff, and it's interesting. It's like making a deal with the devil.
Mhm.
He'll give you something, but you got to give him something in return, and it might turn out to be something you don't want.
Right. It's the he is fulfilling the role that traditionally the genie in Aladdin would have played, because
Right.
the genie is usually, yes, I'll grant you a wish, but it's
May not be
going
what
to
you
be
want.
completely literal as to what you say.
Right. It's like that old Twilight Zone movie. It's like, I want to be a big man, and I want to be respected, and I want to be adored by thousands of people. Oh no, I'm Hitler.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not only am I Hitler, I'm 11th hour Hitler.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm Hitler in the bunker.
Technically, he got his wish.
Yes, technically. But it's like there's this one poor guy. He wants to be a ladies' man, and unfortunately, he has a bald head.
Oh yeah, that guy, yeah.
And he gives him a nice, beautiful head of hair. Unfortunately, turns him into a werewolf.
Basically, yeah. It's so much fun, and I love that he is the villain specifically because he is indebted to the spirits on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him this magic, and they want him to pay them back.
Right.
And if this talisman gets damaged, he'll never be able to pay that back. And
it gets him getting crushed at the end of the movie.
Right. So he's only evil because he himself made a bad deal.
Mm-hmm. He's desperate.
Right. So he, like all of the people that he cons, he's in the same spot as all of them.
Right.
He made a deal that he didn't bet on going south, and he's scared. It's the first time you ever really get to see a scared villain, a villain that's scared of somebody above them.
Mm-hmm.
And
usually they're in control.
Right. But this, he is really winging this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he does not have a solid plan for any of this.
He's fumbling.
Right. This just kind of happened in his lap, and he's making this up as he goes along. And
I'd love to know the story of how he got here.
Right.
Because he did not back into this.
Right.
But but again, we talk about the flavor of New Orleans, the idea of voodoo. Was it voodoo and hoodoo and and all of that stuff, and the magic, the idea of black magic, white magic, whatever you want to call it, is so prevalent in that culture. And the parlor tricks and all of that stuff. That's again New Orleans. That's part of that. The French Quarter culture. And now there was a problem that a lot of people had with this. There were massive problems when this thing went into production that people were concerned about, legitimately, because of Disney's problems with Disney's history with African Americans and other cultures and things like that. One of the things that they were concerned about was the idea of having a black man who works in black magic.
I can see how that would be a possible problem.
And but I think it's played off. I think it's played off because you have this other side with
right, because you have Mama Odie.
You have Mama Odie. So it's not seen as, and it's also seen as his fault.
Right.
It's not seen as a cultural thing.
Right, and it's with Mama Odie, it takes the evil out of the voodoo, because voodoo isn't evil.
Right.
It's one of the most misunderstood ancient practices in the world, right. But it's not inherently evil. It can be used to do bad things if you believe in it, but it is not inherently evil. It's a method of communicating with spirits that dates back hundreds of years, if not thousands. So in this area, it's...
Well, I think any religion that is not used to harm or maim or kill, it's fine. It's your business, whatever you want to practice, whatever you want to believe.
And this is no different than any other religion, that there are people who practice it who actually believe in it, and there are people who practice it who want power, and there are people who will take things far too literally, and that's when everything turns sour. And
a lot of Christians like that.
There's Christians, there's Muslims, there's Jews, I don't really know if there's radical Buddhists, and if there are, they're not really a threat, but
you can't imagine a radical Buddhist. I can't.
I mean, the only thing that I can see is that they're more hermit-like. Like, that's radical Buddhism to me.
Yeah.
They're not hurting anybody.
Yeah, they're not hurting anybody, but you're sitting there going, I can't imagine a Buddhist revolution.
Right.
I can't.
That would be the most peaceful and somnambulous revolution ever. Right. Which I'm all for, honestly, but it's...
And by the way, if there's ever a voodoo revolution, I want to see that.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't just want to see the revolution. I want to see the war between the good and the bad sides and see which one's trying to make the revolution. That would be a damn entertaining spectacle.
Get me a lawn chair and some popcorn. I want to be there.
Absolutely. I'll sit next to you. Because I can't think of any... That would be more entertaining than the wizard duel should have been in The Sword and the Stone.
Right.
And
That's
the highlight of that movie.
That's a highlight of that movie. I'm really coming back to the origins of this movie. I'm really concerned because Disney reached such a high point with this. It really concerns me because the movie didn't make the money that they wanted. And by the way, can we talk about these projections? Because, I mean...
These projections are ridiculous.
We talked about this when we talked about Solo.
Yeah.
And, they projected, was $130 million for the opening weekend, and they made $105.
Right, and they're like, oh, this is a failure. Really?
Yeah. Well, why didn't you just project $100 million and you would have been fine?
Right.
They projected this... I don't know what the numbers were on this, but it didn't make those numbers, and it was because of Avatar.
Uh-huh.
They released it in mid-December. They could have easily released this at Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And understood that, because I'm sure they have an eye on the competition, the
Mm-hmm.
release dates of their competition. And this could have had a couple of weeks to make its money. But it was just so ridiculous because, oh, well, Avatar's out. It's got everybody's attention. This is a failure.
Right.
2D animation is dead. Okay. Well, one doesn't have to do with the other.
Right.
And it's gone down in history as this minor failure. And I'm like, okay, but everybody who's seen it generally loves it.
Yeah, it's a much beloved film. I can't.
And I hate that 2D animation is gone.
Well,
And I hope that it's
in the U.S. anyway, Studio Ghibli's still over in Asia, in Japan and China and stuff. They still make 2D.
right. Well, I'm talking about Disney's animated
Right.
features.
But in the U.S. in general, nobody's really paying for those anymore.
Right. And we're going to get to a point now where there's not going to be a studio that's going to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is doing, and nobody has done probably since the early 80s, has done full 2D animation.
Right, they've been
Without
incorporating
computers.
Right, they've been incorporating computers in it for decades.
And it's sad to me, and I hope that it doesn't say to them, because they had such progress putting together an African American cast, an African American character. I hope it doesn't say to them that, well, that's the reason the movie went sour.
Well,
And I'm thinking,
this is Disney. Bear in mind
this is true. This is true.
that they probably did think that until Black Panther made them a mint. And
Black Panther was released at the right time.
Exactly.
They released it in February.
When there are no good movies out.
Right. They released it sort of at a dead zone.
Mm-hmm.
They released this at a very busy time, and one of the excuses for this was, well, people won't go see a movie with the word princess in the title.
Well, then why did
Nobody's
they
gonna
put the
care.
word princess in the title?
Nobody's going to care.
No.
If it's a good movie and you've advertised it right, and you really don't have to advertise a movie like this all that heavily. It's a Disney movie, and people are going to go see it.
It's a Disney princess movie.
The Disney
And
princess movie.
there is some genuine affection there. There's by 2009, the people who were my age were having kids by then,
Right.
or a little older. My kid was already 5, but I started a little early. But they want to take their kids to a Disney movie. Because
Right.
we were taken to Disney movies as kids. You were taken to Disney movies as a kid.
Mhm.
Everybody
My first movie was a Disney movie.
Yeah,
It was The Rescuers.
every child since Snow White has grown up on going to the movies and seeing Disney pictures, and you want to be able to do that for your kids. I know I did.
Yeah.
We didn't end up seeing this in the theater, but we
I didn't either.
we bought it and we really liked it, and our son liked it and would cool to it for a little while, and then all of a sudden he'd go looking through the movies and he'd see it and he goes, oh, we haven't watched this in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we put it on and he realizes how much he really likes it, and then he forgets about it, and then he watches it again and realizes how much he loves it. And I would rather he watched this more. This is a very positive film.
This is what I call a scroll movie. It's one of those movies that when I'm going through I've got my remote and I'm going down through the grid, and I'm looking for something to watch. I'll see The Princess and the Frog and I'll stop.
Yeah.
While I'm scrolling through, it's like, oh, Princess and the Frog, or like Ghostbusters is like that. I'll stop and watch Ghostbusters.
Godfather,
or something.
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars, The Godfather. any of the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I'll just stop. Even if it's on while I'm looking for something else.
Just so you can listen to it while you're looking for the other thing. Yeah.
Right.
Now, did you see this movie before you started writing your book?
I started writing my book in 2016, so yeah.
Wow.
So I only recently wrote about it. So almost everything you've heard me whine and bitch about in this episode is stuff
is
that
in
came
your
from,
book.
is in that chapter.
I'm
a little ambivalent, by the way, because in my book I've titled it's a book of essays about Disney films and about the what was it? How many we got? 56 Disney animated movies, 57, something like that.
There's barely a few more Disney animated features than there are Hitchcock features.
Right. I've written in this book about the history. It's either an essay or a review or a historical perspective on each and every single one of these movies, from Snow White all the way down to currently it's Ralph Breaks the Internet.
But you'll have to do Frozen too.
And I'll have to do Frozen too. But in each case, I got clever. I started naming my essays based on some relevancy of the of the essay. Like, for example, I called Aladdin the Robin Williams Show. I called my essay on Alice in Wonderland, I called it Mad World. Atlantis, I called it Touched by an Ogre. Because it got trounced by Shrek.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm still ambivalent about the title I've given this one. Black Magic. I'm still ambivalent about that.
I think that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at that this morning. I was like, I need to work on that.
It's not slime, it's mucus. The Princess and the Frog.
Yeah. It was literally one of those things that I threw out there at 2:30 in the morning before I went to bed. I was like,
I need a name for this. I'll go back and change it later.
But you know what? The movie is magical.
It is.
The movie is magical. And, it's got black magic, it's got white magic. It's got a little of everything. I love The Princess and the Frog.
It's a dynamic picture. It's so entertaining. The songs are really good. The characters are so much fun. Prince Naveen is, when I was watching this the other day, I thought, if they decide to give this the live action treatment that they're giving everything else,
Bite your tongue.
the only thing that I could say that would make it worthwhile is if Keith David came back and played the Shadow Man in real life, and if they cast Diego Luna as Prince Naveen, because the voice is perfect.
Can we talk for a second about these remakes?
Yeah, please, because I hate them.
This is driving me crazy.
You haven't seen Aladdin, though, have you?
I haven't seen Aladdin.
Do you know, Aladdin broke my, I think, year-long hiatus of writing weekly reviews. I was so angry at it.
I saw Jungle Book, which I liked very much.
I loved Jungle Book and Pete's Dragon, and they're the only two I can say that
I saw
about.
Pete's Dragon. I saw Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Which was terrible. I saw Cinderella, which had no life to it at all.
Boring. Limit.
I didn't see Dumbo.
I haven't seen Dumbo or The Lion King yet, but I think I've seen all the rest.
Yeah,
of
and
them.
I haven't seen The Lion King. It's.
I don't like. If I'm watching this, now I've heard some people talking about this that are not movie critics, but they're still more or less in the industry. They're podcasters, and the guy that saw it said, he hadn't seen the animated Lion King in a long time, and the story beats that were picked up from the animated feature caused him to remember the animated feature and made him like the movie. And I think that's what happened with Aladdin, too. If you haven't watched these movies in a long time, if you're older, the nostalgia is really going to play on you. But if, like me and like you sit there and you're with these movies a lot because, you have a kid or you're writing a book on it or whatever, and these movies are fresh in your mind because, you personally have just watched them for your book. I watch this stuff all the time because of my kid. Watching these is just like watching a lesser version of the thing that you love, and it's disappointing. And that's the
like
worst part
watching
of it.
something by people who didn't care.
Right.
One thing I never could stand, and I see this happen a lot. If you watch, you and I watch more movies than probably the average bear. So we sit there and we watch movies, and you can spot a movie that is made for the money. You can spot a movie that's made for the profits. You can spot a movie that's made for the profits.
Oh yeah.
And
these feel like cash grabs. These feel like unnecessary cash grabs because this is coming from the studio that literally owns every major blockbuster of the last 20 years because they bought Fox. So they own Avatar, they own Titanic, they own the Avengers, they own Star Wars. They don't need any of this money. And they're just doing it for a cash grab. They're cashing in on the nostalgia of their better works. These things are the single most cynical thing Disney has done in decades.
Well, even those sequels that they were making in the 90s, at least there was something original.
Yeah.
At least there was some at least there was a new story.
Yeah.
They
were bad stories, but they were new.
They were bad stories, but at least, somebody had to think of them.
You're right.
Here, nobody has to think of anything. You just have to...
I can't stand that they're actually not giving screenplay credit to the animated screenwriters.
Yeah.
Like when I was looking at the Aladdin, it's given like writing credit to Guy Ritchie and a couple of other people, and not even based on the screenplay by. It'll just say story by, and it'll have the Clements and Musker along with 75 other people who somehow contributed to this story. Whether they were originally in the animated one or with this one, I don't know. But I think that they just gave story by credit to everybody in the story department and said, oh no, but we wrote the screenplay. No, you didn't.
No.
The only thing that they could have possibly written for Aladdin is the genie's lines, because Robin Williams ad-libbed like 90% of his.
Mm-hmm.
And
and he was so much of that movie.
Mm-hmm. I have to give Will Smith credit for actively trying to make the character his own.
He sings in the movie, right?
Yes.
And they don't let him rap.
No.
That sucks.
Well, where they let him be himself, it's a successful character. Where he had to follow in Robin Williams' footsteps, singing Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, that kind of stuff, it doesn't work because all I could think about was Robin Williams.
Right.
All I could think about in Beauty and the Beast was the animated, the glorious dancing shot of them swirling around the ballroom. I mean, that is one of the most beautifully animated sequences ever. And I'm watching it in ultra technicolor, but it still feels pale. It just didn't. I'm distraught by all of these, and I was given hope by the early brilliance of the Jungle Book, and the absolutely 100% turn in a positive direction for Pete's Dragon, because I hate the
Well, as
original
far
movie.
as Pete's Dragon and the Jungle Book, the reason they work is because they alter the story just a little bit. You don't feel like you're watching a carbon copy of the same thing.
Exactly.
That's what made it work. When I watch Cinderella, I'm thinking I'm just watching the same thing again.
Mm-hmm. And Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. It's all just...
Beauty and the Beast, not so much, because I sat there and watched it and I'm thinking, okay, every single thing that I have spent the last year writing about for Beauty and the Beast and the reason that animated feature worked is not here.
Yeah, no, they missed everything.
None of it is here.
They missed everything on that.
They missed everything. I'm telling you, there are some scary images in that movie. That wardrobe is terrifying.
Yeah.
In the live-action movie.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The whole, and this really bugged me. The news came out that there was a gay character in it, and then you watch the movie and you realize that it's a crumb in that movie, and it's not even worth mentioning.
There's more than one.
Yeah, but I mean, they make mention of it.
Right, there's, what's his name? Pierre? Gaston's little flunky. LeFou. He's gay, or at least gay for Gaston.
But it's such.
But then there's the one that when the wardrobe puts those three guys into women's clothing, the one guy likes it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny. Briefly.
Well, it was a lot funnier than it was in the original, because in the original he was terrified.
Yes.
That's one positive. But it's just, I never in that Beauty and the Beast movie felt that there was any romance. I never felt that there was any, the drawing together of those two people, those two characters in the original, and how he has to overcome who he is to embrace who she is, and they have to come together, and she has to accept him beyond his looks. It's a forced play. It's a forced thing in the live action.
Yeah, because
it just has to happen.
Emma Watson and Dan Stevens have no chemistry whatsoever.
None. And she gives such a dead performance.
Yeah.
I mean, there's you remember Belle in the original was so full of life and energy and wonder and magic. Here, it's just, she is just kind of walking through it. There's no joy here.
Right.
And the movie looks dreary.
It does. Weirdly.
Yeah, and I don't know what Disney's doing. I don't know why Disney feels they need to do this.
I don't either. I would rather they just re-release their animated classics.
Well, their animated features, look, the last one was a sequel. The next one is a sequel. You know, I don't know what they've got after that, but you know, they did Ralph Breaks the Internet, which was and they've got Frozen 2, which I can't work up a lot of interest in.
Well, I didn't really like Frozen all that much.
I don't remember Frozen. I saw it once during screener season. That was it.
I saw it in the theater, and liked it, but couldn't remember any of the songs, and made the fateful Roger Ebert statement in my review of it that the songs are unmemorable, like what he said about Simon and Garfunkel's music in The Graduate. And that became one of the most legendary soundtracks, and this one ended up having Let It Go be friggin' everywhere.
Yeah.
So, but I wasn't that taken with it. It was a very generic picture. And so many people are like, oh, this is the best Disney musical since Beauty and the Beast. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and when I saw it, I knew the history before I saw it, which is very unusual because I don't usually know the history on these things. And I know that Frozen was an idea that went back to Walt. It was an idea that he was formulating before the war, before World War II kind of sidelined what he was wanting to do. But then I saw the movie, and I could not work up any interest in it. Maybe it had to do with the fact that I saw 6 other movies that day. including saving Mr. Banks.
Wow.
So I just when I got to it, I was just like, I wasn't interested in it. I wasn't in the mood for it. Again, I need to see it again. So
I've seen it a few times. I don't think that your estimation is all that off. But
and I'll tell you, the last time that I remember a Disney animated feature that I really thoroughly got excited about was Zootopia,
which was really good.
And I really liked Moana,
Mm-hmm.
and I really liked Wreck-It Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I liked those is because they were original. They weren't sequels to anything.
Right.
And that's what I want from Disney. I want a movie like Princess and the Frog.
Right.
I want a movie like that. I want something original. I'm bothered I'm bothered by the fact that they're buying Hollywood.
Yeah, me too.
The recent Fox acquisition, I'm bothered by that. It bugs me.
Yeah.
The Marvel thing I'm okay with. The Star Wars thing I'm okay with. But sideline to that needs to be original content.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're only, because those three things are what we're getting right now: Marvel, Star Wars, and these remakes.
Mm-hmm.
And these sequels to stuff. And I didn't need a sequel. I really didn't need a sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. I don't need a sequel to Frozen.
No.
But
we're not the ones in the chairs making the decisions.
We're not the ones doling out the millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
We just write books and bitch about it.
Right. I think that about wraps everything up here for us on the Princess and the Frog. What do we have coming up?
What are we talking about next week? Oh, let's see. Oh, me for poor planning. What is wrong with me? I believe next week we're talking about Pulp Fiction. Yep, next week, Pulp Fiction.
I envy you being able to do a quote from that.
We're going from Disney. We're going from Disney to Tarantino.
Technically, we're going from Disney to Disney because they owned Miramax at the time.
That is true. Technically. You have to jump through hoops to get there, but
they did yet. So Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction was a movie, honestly, that it literally dropped on me.
Yeah.
Back in '94, I saw it without knowing anything about it.
I had heard a whole bunch about it, just to how good it was, but I didn't know anything about it going in. I didn't see it in the theater. I was 13 years old when this came out.
I saw it in a theater 4 times.
I borrowed my friend's dubbed rental copy on VHS, and I watched it. And Pulp Fiction and Goodfellas I watched almost in the same week, I think. And they were the two films that were instrumental.
What a double feature!
Yeah, right. For the first time, watching them like in the same week, and they kind of really turned me on to the idea of artistic filmmaking.
Yeah.
So it's a seminal picture for me.
Pulp Fiction came around at the time in the middle of the early '90s independent film boom.
Mm-hmm.
And
this was a large cause of the independent boom.
This came around in the same year. This movie premiered the same year as Clerks.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, because I was in my early 20s, I thought, okay, these are the films that are speaking to me and my generation. I don't feel like, watching these films, that they're a bunch of 60-year-old men deciding what I need to see.
Right.
These were films that were generally for me and understood what I was really looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we'll get to that next week.
I think that about wraps it up here for us. You can find us on iTunes and YouTube. Go to thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com for all of our back episodes. You can find us on Twitter and throw a tip into our virtual tip jar at Patreon, both with the handles at pod_bay. We thank you very much for listening, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed. lover of the bayou. At your doorstep with a halfway ride. I'm the lover of the bayou. I was raised and swam with a crocodile. Snake eye taught me the mojo style. Sucked and weaned on chicken bile. I'm the lover of the bayou. Learn the key to the master lock. Learn to float in the water cloud. Learn to capture the lightning shot. I'm the lover of the bayou. I got cats and teeth and hair for sale. I'm the lover of the bayou. And there are zombies on your tail. I'm the lover of the bayou. Yeah. Cooked a bat in a gumbo pan. Drank the blood from a rusty can. Turned me into the hunger man. I'm the lover of the bayou, yeah.